Good morning, and a very special welcome to the exciting semi-final round of the 2026 Public Sector Debate Competition. We're thrilled to welcome you and extend a special greeting to our virtual audience. We also extend a special welcome to the heads of entities who are supporting their team. Well, on the team of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, we have the CTD, led by Ambassador Janice Miller. Sharon, I'm so sorry. And we have Anya Jones, the Accountant General, supporting her team, Accountant General's Department. It's lovely to have you, ladies. I'm Aniki Clark, Communication Lead here in the TIU, and if you're just joining us, you missed a most exciting match, right? Wasn't it? Yes. Team Administrator General's Department secure the first spot in the grand finale of the Public Sector Debate Competition. And Team Teaching Service will be playing in the third place playoff. Now we have another exciting match between, in proposition, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And in opposition, the Accountant General's Department. Who will win this match? I want to hear who will win this match. Okay, they will be debating the mood. Be it resolved that Jamaica should decriminalise consensual sex between minors who are close in age. A very thought-provoking mood, right? And it's one that speaks not only to the law, but to how we as a society balance protection, justice, accountability, and the realities faced by our young people. Let's get to meet the teams, beginning with Team Proposition, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade.
I'm Jamil Deandra Chin, first speaker.
Shakina Morgan, second speaker.
Let's make them feel welcome. And we now ask Team Opposition, Accountant General's Department, to introduce themselves.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon. Brandon Lee Fagan, first speaker.
Hello, everyone. Brittany Wright, second speaker.
Ricardo Brooks, the reply speaker.
Thank you very much, Team Accountant General. And our adjudicators come to us from our partners for this competition, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, JADE. And we also have a very special guest adjudicator today. Judges, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning, teams, or good afternoon, teams, and congratulations on making it to the semifinals. This is truly a momentous feat, and you should both be very proud of yourselves. Of course, again, I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and I'll be serving as a chair judge for this match. Best of luck to both teams.
Hello, teams. Hi, everyone. I'm Jermaine Barrett. I'll be a wing adjudicator in this match. Best of luck to both teams.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Brown, Associate Clinical Psychologist working primarily with adolescents and guest judge for this match, and best of luck to both teams.
Good morning. Is it still morning? It's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kaliseti Vassal. I'll be serving as a wing adjudicator. Congratulations on making the semifinals and all the best.
Thank you very much, judges. I know you can't wait, and I won't stand between you and the debates. All that's left for me to do is to hand over to Chair Adjudicator Ravon, who will marshal the match. Good luck, teams.
All right, thank you very much, Aniki, and I must say that this is a match that I'm truly looking forward to. The match earlier today was exciting, and I'm expecting this one to be equally as exciting, and I'm sure the teams will say it's going to be more, right? All right. So, of course, this debate is going to be governed by the JADE parliamentary debate format. This format will see both speakers from the each team. The first speakers presenting for 7 minutes. The second speakers, you will have 6 minutes to present your case, and the third and final speakers from each team, you will have 5 minutes. It's important to note that for the first 2 speakers on each team, you have what we consider a protected time. That is a 1-minute interval during which no points of information will be allowed. So your first period of protected time starts when we start the clock, and it ends when you've reached 1 minute. Of course, your second period of protected time, therefore, is when you have 1 minute remaining in your speech. It's important to note that at the end of your speech, you're going to hear the building twice. That means that you've used up the allocated time. However, we're going to give you 15 seconds so that you can finish that really pressing thought or really push that final idea out. After which, you're going to hear the building continuously, which means that the judges are no longer listening and, in fact, you're just holding up the debate. All right? Now, of course, between the first sets of speakers, that is the first 2 speakers, we're going to have a period of cross-examination. Between the second and third speakers, we're going to have another period of cross-examination. I'll tell you a little bit more about those 2 periods when we get to that part of the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, this is for all the marbles. The moot before the House reads, "Be it resolved that Jamaica should decriminalise consensual sex between minors who are close in age." It is my privilege to open this second match of the semi-finals of the public sector debate competition. Hear, hear. We invite the first speaker from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Please make welcome Jamil Chin.
Distinguished adjudicators, worthy opponents, esteemed colleagues, today I stand before you as the proposition firmly in support of the motion. Mr. Speaker, this debate is not about weakening child protection. It is about making child protection fairer, smarter, and more proportionate. The proposition supports stringent penalties for adults who exploit children and all predatory conduct. What we oppose is the criminalization of minors in genuinely consensual relationships, close in age, where there is no exploitation or abuse. The proposition's burden is not to prove that minors should be encouraged to have sex. Our burden is to prove that criminal prosecution is the wrong response to have sex. Our burden, the opposition must prove that blanket criminalization of all children, all under 16 sexual activity is preferable even where both persons close in age minors and there is no coercion, exploitation, or abuse, and that it is necessary, proportionate, and safer than a targeted exception. Let's take a look at our definitions. To decriminalize means to no longer treat as a criminal offense. Minors close in age we define as persons who belong to the same peer group. And for this motion, this means persons below the age of 16 who have no more than a 2-year age gap between them. We define this concept in this way as the age of consent is 16, thus minors are below the age of 16. Thus, persons who lack the ability to consent in law are not peers of those who can. Hence, the persons age 16 and above are treated as an adult for the purposes of sex. And finally, 2 years is the standard number of years used to separate children when a close-in age exception is introduced in law in other jurisdictions. Consensual sex, any sexual activity agreed to willingly by all participants, completely free of coercion, force, or manipulation. Neuroplasticity, a concept which my second speaker will present on, is defined by the Harvard Medical School as the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout life by modifying its structure, functions, or neural pathways. Let's define the status quo. Under Jamaica's current legal framework, the age of consent is 16, and sexual intercourse with a person under 16 is criminalized under the Sexual Offences Act of 2009. The challenge is that the law does not adequately distinguish between consensual, close-in-age conduct between minors and predatory or exploitative conduct. Jamaica's criminal justice framework can treat a child as an offender once they reach 12 years of age. This is precisely why a close-in-age exception matters. Children should not be criminalized for non-exploitative consensual peer conduct. The data indicates that this is not merely theoretical. According to the 2025 Jamaicans for Justice report, a civil society review of the diversion and alternative measures for children in conflict with law in Jamaica, 308 cases of 452 sexual offense matters involved sexual intercourse with a person under 16, typically between consenting minors.
Point of information.
Accepted.
How do you determine what is genuinely consensual in an environment where children are being pressured from all sides, not necessarily from the person who they had the sexual contact with, but outside of that relationship?
Genuinely consensual mean that they have made a conscious decision between themselves to engage in an activity where both of them are consenting. So, of the 308 cases of the 452, sexual intercourse with a person under 16, typically consenting minors. So in practice, Jamaica's current law is not only merely catching predators, it is also pulling adolescent peer relationships into the criminal justice system. As first speaker, I will posit two arguments. One, children are overcriminalized by current legislation, which harm the minors, the very minors it claims to protect. And two, child protection is strengthened by a close-in-age exception. My second speaker will argue that the law should not criminalize normal adolescent behavior. Now, to my first argument, not accepted. Children are overcriminalized by current legislation, which harms the very minors it claims to protect. Under the Sexual Offences Act, sexual activity involving a person under 16 may be treated as a criminal offense, even where the persons involved are close in age and both minors. This means that the law can place children into the criminal justice system for sexual conduct, which is better addressed through child-sensitive interventions, counseling, parental guidance, psychosocial support, education, and health services. My opponents, there's absolutely no comparison between an adult predator and a minor in a mutual pair relationship. Moral clarity is fundamentally lost when we treat both situations similarly. The trauma and harm are irreparable: arrest, litigation, public humiliation, criminal record, disruption to school, family shame, and fear for the future. The point is demonstrated, not accepted, in the Teddy Bear Clinic for Abused Children versus the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, a 2013 landmark judgment by the Constitutional Court of South Africa that ruled that criminalizing consensual adolescent sexual conduct violated children's rights to privacy, dignity, and their best interests. My second argument, child protection is strengthened by a close-in-age exception. Mr. Speaker, currently the Sexual Offences Act is too blunt an instrument where two minors close in age are involved in a genuinely consensual peer relationship. And this is why Jamaica should adopt a child safeguard close-in-age exception. The opposition may argue that decriminalization poses a loophole. The proposition is proposing a guarded and structured exception. A close-in-age exception will exclude adults entirely and must clearly state that the exception does not apply where there is force, exploitation, trafficking, threats, dependency, authority, or a significant age gap. As such, predators will still be punished under the law, but it would stop treating children involved in peer relationships as predators. Mr. Speaker, this proposal is not radical. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, ratified by Jamaica in 1991, says that states should avoid criminalizing adolescents of similar ages for factually consensual and non-exploitative sexual activity. I rest.
All right, thank you very much. That was the first speaker from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. At this point in time, we invite the first speaker from the Accountant General's Department. Please make welcome Brandon Lee Fagan.
Honorable Chair, esteemed judges, members of the House, worthy opponent, good day. Here's the proposition case, and I'd like to put my own comments against them. First, they state that this form of consent that they describe, it doesn't include outside forces, but I'm pretty sure these teens don't live in a vacuum. I'll address furthermore within my speech. They also state that the child, irregardless of their brain capacity, can make these decisions. I'm also against that as well, which it will be addressed further in my speech. They mention adult predators. But once again, we are talking about children within close age. They specified a 2-year age gap, so I don't see why we're involving adults. But let me remind you, I should say, children can be predators too among themselves. So, the state must prioritize protection over flexibility when dealing with minors, because when it comes to children, the cost of getting it wrong is too high. Laws that protect children must be designed to minimize the risk and consequences of their exploration and poor decision-making, even if that means curtailing the child's privacy and their pretended consent to sex. A government's first responsibility is to protect the vulnerable. Our arguments are not about punishment, they are about protection. I'll also add a further few comments to first proposition speaker definition of consent. It is an act or agreement between parties that is voluntary and involves understanding of the act and its consequences with the absence of pressure and the capacity to make an informed decision. Hold on to that point. As first speaker, I will show the flaw in proposition argument and how children under the age of consent should not be allowed to make high-stakes sexual decisions. My second speaker, Brittany, will show the perceived harms that exist now are far less than what the proposition proposed with decriminalization for underage sex. Our reply speaker will establish why side opposition has won this debate. So for my first point, evidently, we can see that there's a significant percentage of minors who are engaging in sexual activities. The consequences of these activities, however, include teenage pregnancy, for which there's no abortion, also school disruption, sexually transmitted disease, mental trauma, and economic strain show that underage sex can be harmful. In a culture among youth, boys receive social encouragement and pressure to have sex too soon. Not ready for you. They are told that if they are not having sex, they are not men. Girls are told if they don't have sex, they will become less desirable. These problems demonstrate why the existing law is important. Multiple child protection reports and UNICEF data, not ready for you, and UNICEF data consistently show that Jamaica faces significant challenge in protecting children who have limited access to support services. The chairman of the Early Childhood Commission stated that Jamaica scored 51% in the Child Protection Index score from a study done by Childline and Global Protection Research Organization. Once again, these problems demonstrate why the existing prohibitions is important. Go ahead.
Wouldn't comprehensive sex education be a more effective deterrent to underage sexual activity other than a criminal prosecution?
So yes, we acknowledge that education would be a good point in this. However, you can't expect to take down the guardrails with giving just education. If somebody is driving too close to the curb, yes, you can say, don't go over there in educating them, but the guardrail needs to be there just in case something happens. My second point, minors do not have full legal or intellectual capacity to give informed consent. Scientific evidence shows that their prefrontal cortex, not ready for you, the part of the brain responsible for long-term thinking and risk assessment is not fully developed in minors. Psychiatric research from the World Health Organization and UNICEF supports this and also state that the minor's brain is wired to prioritize reward and excitement, making them biologically more at risk for taking these risky behaviors. This is also a point in their time when they are most susceptible to peer pressure. So what the proposition is calling consent is more emotional decision, pressured choices, and socially influenced decisions. This means that what appears to be mutual choice may be influenced by social expectations, immaturity, vulnerability, and even indirect intimidation. In reality, proving that the absence of coercion or psychological authority in court is notoriously difficult. First proposition mentioned the Sexual Offense Act, which clearly states that it establishes persons under 16 cannot legally consent, precisely because the law recognizes the difficulty of validating consent in minors. Additionally, it can be argued that consent among minors is not static. It is influenced by stigma, social pressure, emotional dynamics. Research shows that youth cases, statements, and their positions can change due to peer influence and fear of consequences. This instability makes underage consent difficult to rely on in a legal safeguard. My last point, Mr. Speaker, the criminal stigma, while harsh, acts as a critical societal deterrent. Removing that label entirely sends the wrong message to youth and state that the state condones early sexual activity. The role of the law, therefore, is not to accommodate this behavior, but to serve as the deterrent and manage the risks that come with it. We restrict alcohol from minors because of its effects on their judgment and health. We do not allow minors to vote because we accept they may not fully understand national decision. We require age thresholds and training before they're allowed to drive. Why wouldn't we do the same with sex? Proposition removes the deterrent and replaces it with a system dependent on interpretation. We maintain clear boundaries while ensuring fairness through diversion. Their model punishes but increases risk. Ours reduces harm while removing protection. The law is not made specifically for criminalizing children as what the proposition wants you to believe, but it is for preserving a clear boundary, that allows intervention when harm occurs and to uphold an acceptable standard of society. Even if we take proposition at their best and say some cases are unfair, the risk of missing real harm is far greater than the risk of overprotection. They are weakening protection. This is not reform. They are accepting risk, and for that, we reject the moot.
For a fun and engaging and answering rather questions of each other. Each question is going to be limited to 10 seconds and each answer is going to be limited to 45 seconds. Importantly, for the team that is asking the question, only one person may do so at a time. But for the team that is answering the question, the entire team can chime in to provide the most robust and comprehensive answer as long as it fits within that 45-second window. For this segment, we will invite first the Accountant General's Department to pose their 3 questions.
In an environment, colleagues, where children are already highly sexualized, what justification is there for the state to validate that behavior such that they become even more sexualized and normalized in sexual practices?
So the law does not determine whether teenagers are attracted to one another. Neither does decriminalization does not encourage sexual activity. So what we're saying is that it simply prevents the disproportionate criminal punishment that you are offering to mete out to adolescents if they engage in consensual sexual activity.
When you remove a deterrent, of course you're encouraging them to continue. When you tell them that this behavior is valid and justified, you're telling them to continue. Why?
A question, please.
Why?
One, your side hasn't proven to date that criminal sanctions acts as an effective deterrent. On our side, education is far more effective at deterring the relevant conduct, and we say it doesn't impose the relevant harms that criminal sanctions do. So your side, you need to prove why it's necessary, of all the things that could be done, to criminally prosecute persons close in age under the age of 16. I think that's crazy.
But isn't it necessary, Scott, because the sex education campaigns are failing? You just told us that there's been a dramatic increase or a large amount of children are having sex. So your sex education campaigns have already failed. Why continue to double down on it?
Hold on. You're talking about the status quo where there are criminal sanctions? So under your case, people are having sex under the age of 16 and the sanctions are not effective. On our side, we say remove the sanctions, remove the harm, emphasize more comprehensive sex education. That actually will work. Under your status quo, which your side haven't offered an alternative, you need to explain why the status quo is good based on what you've just said. It's not working out at all.
Thank you very much. And your 3 questions, Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
If both persons are minors, close in age as we've defined it, and there is no coercion or exploitation, who exactly is the predator?
So we say to you, Scott, that it's very difficult. You're creating legal ambiguity. It's very difficult to determine what exactly constitutes predatory behavior simply on the basis that they are close in age. Because a prefect in a high school who is 16 years old can very well have coercive authority because they hold a position of authority. I don't think age alone, we certainly don't think age alone removes the risk of predators being present. Next question.
What evidence do you have that prosecuting close-in-age minors make children safer?
So we say to you, my friend, that we think it's much safer to stick with the status quo, the deterrence that the status quo creates, than to open it up to a situation where we normalize sexual behavior, we further sexualize children. In fact, when we tell them it's okay to have sex, the very thing you say you guard against, which is that they become susceptible to predators, may become a real possibility and reality.
Additionally, just think about it. If the state goes ahead and says sex is good, but the parents say sex is bad in their binary, then just look at it. You are basically undermining parental authority.
Do you reject the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child's guidance that states should avoid criminalizing adolescents of similar ages for factually consensual and non-exploitative sexual activity, and why?
Yes, we reject all woke Western liberal ideologies. Yes, we reject all Western woke liberal ideologies that tell our children that it's okay to engage in sexual activity before their brains are developed enough to process the consequences.
And thank you very much for that fun, quick, and spicy period of cross-examination. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, we are going to invite the second speaker from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Please make welcome Shekinah Morgan.
Adjudicators, worthy opponents, audience, good afternoon. I stand before you this afternoon to further advance and solidify the case of team proposition by proffering one additional argument, and that is the law should not criminalize normal adolescent behavior. Before I go along, I would just like to point out that I find it very prudent to indicate that further down in my speech, I will rebut the claim that the opposition was making about neuroplasticity and the fact that children's prefrontal cortex are not properly developed. Firstly, we should note that Jamaica already recognizes that children and adults should not be treated identically under the law. Our juvenile justice system is built upon this very principle. Consensual sexual activity between minors who are close in age is oftentimes a normal and foreseeable part of adolescent development. A lot of us in this room can attest that we've seen it and we've witnessed it. According to the U.S. National Institutes of Health, puberty is a natural biological process. A natural biological process. Each one of you went through puberty. Yep. During which this is a time during which persons are sexually maturing, typically between the ages of about 8 to 14 for both boys and girls. During this period, children's bodies experience significant physical and hormonal changes, particularly increases in estrogen and androgens, such as not accepted, such as testosterone. Hormones play a major role in the development of sexual attraction, romantic interest, and curiosity about intimate relationships. During puberty, breasts start to grow, facial hair start to sprout, pubic hair start to sprout, and curiosity about intimate relationships just fly overboard, as well as wet dreams become more frequent.
Point of information.
Not accepted. Studies by the American Academy of Pediatrics have indicated that children experience self-stimulation in early childhood between the ages of 3 to 6 years, which becomes more clearly linked to puberty and sexual arousal during adolescence. Also, the World Health Organization notes that during the ages of 8 to 14, sexual behavior such as masturbation becomes more biologically driven rather than purely exploratory. Not accepted. The evidence shows that sexual awareness and exploration emerges naturally during childhood and becomes biologically driven during puberty, reinforcing that sexual development is a normal part of adolescence, not criminal deviance, my opponent. This is not merely our opinion. This is a matter of science. As such, it is neither unusual or abnormal for minors, especially those experiencing puberty, to develop romantic relationships and, in some cases, engage in consensual sexual activity with their peers, not accepted, who are of a similar age and maturity level. In fact, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, in a 2023 study noted that approximately 32% of high school students reported having had sexual intercourse, with nearly 21% being currently sexually active at the time. As such, what we're asking for the law to do is to recognize this reality, understand what is happening around us, and address it appropriately. But instead, the law has failed, and it is still failing, to distinguish between predatory conduct and ordinary adolescent behavior when it treats two consenting minors of similar age as criminals for engaging in consensual sexual activity. A 14-year-old and a 15-year-old in a consensual relationship do not present us, Mr. Speaker, with the same challenges that a 35-year-old and a 15-year-old do.
Point of information.
Not accepted. One reflects the realities of adolescent development. The other reflects exploitation. So, I would love for the opposition to stand before us this afternoon and tell us why and how we should justifiably apply the same criminal penalties in both instances. This type of criminalization, Mr. Speaker, will undoubtedly leave our minors saddled with unjust legal consequences and social stigma for something not accepted. That is innate and is as a result of normal biological and emotional development. This will produce a level of harm that is irreversible, affecting their future educational, professional, and personal opportunities. Is that what the opposition is telling us to accept?
May I tell you?
Not. Because honestly
Order,
speaking,
order,
Because honestly speaking, which reputable institution is going to hire a young man who has on his criminal record that he was engaged in some sexual offense arising from a consensual relationship with a peer? A youthful mistake, Mr. Speaker, should not be a lifelong barrier to personal advancement. Opposition, we do not need to criminalize young people to teach them responsibility. We're not giving minors a license to have sex. Yes, there should be responsibility and accountability, but not to the detriment and traumatization of our minors. Rather, we contend that consensual sex between minors who are close in age should be addressed through comprehensive sex education and parental guidance, not criminal prosecution. To go a bit further, beyond the hormones and puberty, modern neuroscience is another compelling reason why the law should not treat consensual close-in sex relationships between minors as criminal conduct. Bearing in mind the definition offered by my first speaker of neuroplasticity, it should be noted that during adolescence, the brain's development is at its highest, with the brain continuing to develop well into a person's mid-20s, specifically the prefrontal cortex, as you would have said, which is responsible for decision-making and impulse control. On the other hand, the limbic system, which he referred to as the reward system, is responsible for processing the emotions, and that system develops much earlier in the children, which is highly active during adolescence. As a result, adolescents often experience strong emotional and social impulses prior to full development of their brain, which will help them with the evaluation of long-term consequences. What this means, you may ask, is that when two minors engage in consensual sexual activity, both are operating within the same developmental stage. Neither party possesses the maturity or neurological development that would place them in the same category as an adult who exploits a child. In this regard, the law is making a grave error when it treats minors close in age who engage in acts of consensual sex as adults. How can the opposition justifiably sit before us and tell this House to accept and support the criminalization of normal adolescent behavior when their neurological system is still under construction, it is still being built? Tell me how you can really sit and tell us to accept that. As someone with a child, how would you expect me to accept that? What we propose is that when adolescents make poor decisions, society has a unique opportunity to educate rather than stigmatize, guide rather than condemn. I pause.
Thank you very much. We now invite the second speaker from the Accountant General's Department, Brittany Wright.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Speaker, guardrails are not just built for decoration on roads. They are a protective barrier for drivers who may end up driving just a little too close to the edge, thereby stopping them from going over. Now, today's proposition asks this House to remove these guardrails entirely and trust that everything will be A-OK. But when we're dealing with vulnerable minors, prevention is better than cure. It is evident that Sarah proposition wants to paint the narrative that side opposition's case is solely about criminalizing minors to the extreme extent. And that, again, is simply far from the truth, as this debate at its core is about protecting our children. Opposition's position is simple. We're against the motion before this House because the law should remain as it serves as protection, deterrent, and speaks to upholding moral responsibility. Now, before advancing our case, let me point out a flaw that proposition has made. The second speaker spoke about puberty and about the natural biological process that it is, and speaking about the hormones, etc., etc., etc. Now, I'm not sure how exactly this adds to your case, but if it is that you're going to hinge at the fact that this is a normal activity, then proposition, you also are a part of the problem, and I will speak further to that in my later argumentation. Now, let me begin with my first point, the dangers of decriminalization. This is where Sarah proposition's case again collapses, as they automatically assume that close in age means everything is on safe and level ground. Again, this is not so. A 15-year-old can manipulate a 14-year-old in the same way a 14-year-old can pressure a 13-year-old to engage in sexual activities. There's an obvious imbalance here that exists, my opponents, as it relates to maturity, influence, and power. So once these legal exemptions for the close-in age arguments are made, then immediate questions will arise, such as, was this manipulation? Was this coercion? What about emotional pressure? Was that involved? Was it really consensual? Not at this time. And how exactly can we prove these things? And up until this point, I have yet to hear the proposition address just how exactly these questions will be properly dealt with and answered, given the legal exemptions that they are vying for. Even in recent times, time, proposals to decriminalize have acknowledged concerns about loopholes and exploitation.
Yeah.
So you may be wondering now, the dangers of decriminalization lead to what exactly? Time won't allow me to go through all of them, not at this time, but let us focus on these three. First being legal ambiguity, as it makes it even more difficult to detect manipulation, coercion, and consent. What should be a clear red line suddenly becomes shaded gray. Second, a shield for predators, as exploitation does not require adulthood, meaning that minors themselves can very well be predators towards other minors, so long as influence and vulnerability are in play, not at this time, Scott. Third, the breakdown of the protective norm of society, as the law should encourage parental guidance, not undermine it. So there cannot be discord with the law giving permission while parents are teaching their children restraint, as this altogether erodes parental authority entirely. No, it is as simple as this, not at this time. The more exceptions we make, the more confusion is created. And the more confusion there is, the more difficult it is to protect our children. My final argument, Mr. Speaker, is that of the failure of social institutions. Now, let us reason for a bit. When we think about teaching children values, responsibilities, and self-control, who are the persons who primarily teach them these things? Well, it starts at the home, Mr. Speaker. And then we have the school, we have the churches, and even the wider community, all of which are primary agents of socialization. Yet, Jamaica continues to struggle with adolescent pregnancy and child sexual vulnerability. UNICEF reports that Jamaica has one of the highest adolescent pregnancy rates in the English-speaking Caribbean, with approximately 70 births per 1,000 girls under 16 years. They also highlighted unplanned pregnancies and STIs as persistent concerns facing our youth. So the proposition sees these realities and they automatically say, oh, since our children are already engaging in sexual activities, then it is normalized now, so let's just decriminalize it. Mr. Speaker, that is an extremely flawed logic, if not one of the most flawed logics I've ever heard, because, not because a problem exists, means it is justified to remove the very same rule, or in this case law, to address that problem. Furthermore, side proposition wants its host to believe that criminalization automatically means punishment. Again, that is not so. The Child Diversion Act has already provided for children to be diverted towards rehabilitative efforts rather than throwing them in prison and locking away the key. And under this same act, minors can be referred for counseling, psychoeducational therapy, mentorship programs, and community service as per the needs of the child. Mr. Speaker, aside from the wealth of the aid of child psychologists, educators, and child protection officers, who build out specific individualized plans to meet the needs of the children based on guidance and not punishment. So if we're weighing the scale of criminalization versus compassion, compassion has already won, as it is built into our existing system that SAR proposition wants to eradicate. A Jamaican researcher, Professor Audrey Pottinger, has warned that minors are often filling emotional and social voids when institutions fail them, and that society must be intentional in shaping their development. That is why there are protections already built into the legal system, which is again aimed at redirecting minors. Now, the statistics I would have presented earlier do not show that the law has failed. It has shown that society has failed. And if we continue on this path of failing our children and continuing with the narrative of normalizing sexual activity among them, thereby conditioning hypersexuality within them, then what next? Parliament has a duty to stand up and must not fail our children too. The law remains as a necessary guardrail around our minors. So in conclusion, we would have spoken that our case is again speaking on protection, deterrence, and moral responsibility. Protection because we value our minors and they're vulnerable. We advocate for deterrence because children still need guidance, and moral responsibility comes into play because Parliament needs to do more than just sit and accept whatever behavior has become normalized or common. For these reasons, we proudly oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the second period of cross-examination. But just before we engage in that period, a slight warning to the teams. We love the vibes and the energy, but let us maintain the spirit of sportsmanship, all right?
Appreciate it, Scott.
The spirit of sportsmanship. All right. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the second period of cross-examination. This time, however, we'll invite the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to pose their first question.
Do you accept that it is reasonable to distinguish between persons who can consent to sex under law and those who cannot?
Sorry, repeat that?
Do you accept that it is reasonable to distinguish between persons who cannot consent to sex in law and those who can?
Which the law does, yes.
Do you agree that the point of the distinction is to recognize the diminished capacity of persons below the age of 16 when it comes to sex?
So we think that while there's diminished capacity in terms of how their brain develops, we don't accept your premise that predators only exist over the age of 16. We think age is not the only benchmark or delineation on which a predator can emerge. In fact, there have been cases in court where 13-year-olds have viciously buggered and assaulted children, young children. And we fear that in your world, you will normalize that kind of behavior because then you would have removed the one remaining deterrent factor that exists.
So in light of the fact that your side hasn't proposed any change to the law, under the status quo, isn't criminalizing persons who have a diminished capacity when it comes to sex inconsistent with the point of the distinction between those who can consent to sex in law and those who cannot? In light of the fact you've not offered any change.
Yeah. So again, we think it's necessary to retain criminalization as a deterrent force. But Brittany also pointed to that in the status quo, the law already allows for very diversion tactics that take into account what you're trying to solve. So in your world, this business of sex education and family counseling, we're saying to you, already exists. So why remove the guardrail so they can go over the cliff?
All right, thank you very much for that first half of our second cross-examination. We now invite the questions from the Accountant General's Department.
How do you guarantee that the comprehensive sex education and the family counseling will guard against the consequences as outlined so far by Brandon and Brittany?
On our side, we need only show that it is a more effective deterrent than criminal sanctions imposed on all persons who engage in sex below the age of 16. Keep in mind, your side hasn't offered an alternative to what the status quo is. So all persons below the age of 16, you think properly should face criminal sanctions. We say that is disproportionate. It causes more harm than good. It is sufficient to improve comprehensive education to achieve the reasonable prospect of deterrence without the harm to children.
So sex education doesn't become better because you sprinkle the word comprehensive on it. But here's the thing. It's neither fairer or smarter when it's already failing. You've already conceded that they're having unbridled sexual intercourse. So sex education has failed. So why propose a failing strategy still?
Here's the key flaw in your argument. Remember, you're defending the status quo. You're saying the criminal sanctions are necessary for deterrence. So every time you cite, purportedly, high rates of underage sex, you prove the point that your sanction isn't working.
Since minors are already protected from harsh punishment through the diversion programs, what problem does decriminalization actually solve?
Hold on. The child diversion program, still works on the premise that you're going to face the prospect of criminal prosecution and all the harms associated with that. So we can't see on your side, if you do think it's necessary to avoid the harshness of the criminal justice system, you don't think it's appropriate to ensure where there's genuinely consensual sex between persons close in age below the age of 16, that somehow that's problematic. Keep in mind, judges, to date they have not dealt with the principle. Is it acceptable to prosecute persons who genuinely engage in sex consensually below the age of 16? So far, their best argument appears to be, it's murky, we don't know when they're consenting.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause for 1 minute. We are going to hear next from the two reply speakers. They'll be doing everything in their power to convince the judges that their team deserves a slot in the grand finals. To aid them in that quest, we'll provide them with a 1 minute prep time. That 1 minute break starts now. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the point where the final speaker from the Accountant General's Department is going to present their case. Please make welcome Ricardo Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This debate fundamentally comes down to whose worldview, whose world best protects children. We agree that children need to be protected. We agree with opposition. Opposition agrees with us. There's no disparity there. The question is, who best does that, right? So, side proposition tells you that there's a parade of horribles that comes from criminalization. So far as I've been able to distinguish, those parade of horribles is that there might be a court record and that they may go through a criminal process. That's their parade of horribles. We tell you on this side that the horribles include risk of sexually contracted diseases, the risks of pregnancy, the risk of engaging in a practice that sexualizes children to a point that they become susceptible to predators. Now, I know side proposition has tried to tell you that once you're over or under 16, you can't be a predator. That's what they've been trying to tell you that. It's not true, right? So we've said to you that children, yes, who are close in age, and that age gap, as they say, being 2 years, can be predators, right? We don't think that there's automatically a magic wand that says once you're below 16, then you're an angel. We do not accept that, and we think you should disregard that argument entirely. And the evidence suggests that there are child predators, right? And so where that relationship now becomes ambiguous, and you remove a clear red line, as Brittany told you, you open the door to shades of gray. And we say in a child protection framework, we cannot allow that, because where there are shades of gray, the risk of innocence being damaged or destroyed is far too great a burden for this parliament to take on. The next question is, what exactly constitutes genuinely consensual sex? That's the term, and they seem to think that if you sprinkle words on terms, then it transforms them. Genuinely consensual is ambiguous in a case where one child may have a power imbalance with another child. That exists. It could be because a child is a prefect, a child may be a student counselor, a child may be an influencer, like, tap, share. Those relationships become very difficult to manage. And we're saying to you, reject this argument that children are all angels. Then there's the argument that says puberty is normal. We agree. But you know what is not normal? Sex among and between minors. Sexual contact between children is an abnormality. And we say to you, the Parliament of Jamaica, acting as an agent of socialization, she cited the woke Western liberal idea that where anything goes, where moral slide and moral relativity rules. We say to you in Jamaica, the Parliament of Jamaica should be a bulwark against that. It should stand against that. And citing to me that the UN or the Children's Advocate has said it's okay, does not make it okay. And because the Parliament should reflect the cultural mores of a society, it ought not to acquiesce to that kind of behavior. We also say to you, the risk of moral slide, where we normalize sexualization between children, where does it end? Where does it end? Because it can't simply be because we tell children you can engage in sex, but you don't have to deal with the consequences of sex, then that's permissible. Because if it is that the consequences that you get a court record or you have to go through the court process, we're saying to you, we're teaching them the importance of consequence. And we think on that premise, it's valid. Because if you deter them, yes, by having a law, you at least get them to understand consequence. And if they breach that, unfortunately, there are consequences. That's how life works. And if we're teaching children how to be and how to exist in society, then we think that needs to happen. Then they say to you, finally, sex education, family counseling. That's their proposal. That's what they're going to use to mop up whatever challenges they see. We're saying to you, it doesn't work. But we already concede, ladies and gentlemen, that there are harms on both sides. We concede that. We say that, yes, going through the court system, having a criminal record, harmful. But we say when you balance those two things, you put it on the scale, whose worldview creates more harm? Whose worldview less protects children? We say to you, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, world does more harm to children. It is better, we think, that a child go through the process, understand consequences, than live with long-term harms that fundamentally damage their social standing, their relationship with their community, and their own sense of self. Puberty is normal. Sex between children is not. The Parliament should reject it.
Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude this debate, we invite the final speaker, that is Scott Mullings from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade.
Mr. Speaker, the key question in this debate is a question of principle, a question of what is just and proportionate in a given circumstance. On our side, we've outlined that it's fundamentally unjust to fail to make a clear distinction between what is clearly predatory sexual conduct and consensual, close-in-age peer conduct. That principle has not been effectively contested on their side. Their best argument is sometimes we don't know when they consent. But what is the answer to the question of is it just when it's clear that there's consent? No clear argument there. Their arguments at most appear to be, look here, hey guys, we don't know when they're going to consent. There's potential exploitation among peer groups. True, which is why we introduced the close-in-age exception and why we insist it must be consensual conduct free of coercion. So what is their argument to that principle? Oftentimes when you're faced with a difficult proposition, you have to face it directly. I understand their position. It's really hard to defend their side, but it's their obligation is to face up to the question of when there's genuine consent, what do you do with it? They haven't given you a case on that as yet. That should be sufficient to demonstrate why we win. But let's go further. What is our argumentation? Let's go into some detail. Let's remind ourselves of the arguments. First, we talked about the overcriminalization of children. We talked about the fact that this actually creates significant harm. Are they contesting that? They agree. Okay? We go further. We talk about the neurological development of children, and we say that leads to a diminished capacity. They accept it because they're trying to stress this argument about consent. Here's the other side of that. If you are in a position where your faculties are not sufficiently developed so you can't trust them to consent to the relevant sexual activity, why are you punishing them for it? Why are you punishing them for it? How do they, in that circumstance, have the required culpability to face criminal sanctions? You see, the point of the distinction between the 16 and those below is that we're recognizing that the persons below need help and guidance, not criminal sanctions. So when we expose to you the severe harms to children flowing out of the criminal sanctions process, your counter can simply be we need some sort of a deterrence, especially when you haven't demonstrated how criminal sanctions are necessary to deterrence. The second key question here. On their side, they're defending the status quo. So they need to explain to us why it's necessary to deter the relevant conduct. On our side, we accept underage sexual activity should be deterred. So what's their case why it's necessary, why it must be done, notwithstanding all the harms that we've established and they accept, including their diminished capacity? What's their argument? To be honest with you, I haven't heard it yet. They haven't given you a compelling case. In fact, we demonstrate that in all of their questions, we show that there is a situation of underage sexual activity, notwithstanding the criminal sanctions. We say, remove the harm attached to the activity, especially where it's common. Even if you want to describe it as abnormal in the sense of morally speaking, the facts remain. It is typical behavior among adolescents. We need to treat with that proportionately. Are we going to lock all of them up? Is that the way we're going to teach them a lesson? How is that the necessary response? How is this going to deter their conduct? No compelling argumentation on their side. But finally, and the most important question here, does this cause more harm than good? Because even if you can make the case somehow that it's necessary, if the harms outweigh the good that's going to come from it, remember, they're defending the status quo, we're offering a change, then our side win. So let's talk about the relevant harms here. Let's go over it again. A child, diminished capacity, facing criminal sanctions, facing the deterrence in terms, well, deterrence in terms of their education, nothing else, deterrence in terms of their holistic development, their side says, yeah, but we need to do something because children can't be encouraged to engage in this activity. Our response is comprehensive sex education. We think that is sufficient to deter the type of conduct in light of the harms imposed by criminal sanctions. They haven't demonstrated to you that when we look at the holistic case of the development of a child, the best interest of the child, more good is going to be produced for the child who's facing criminal sanctions when they're under the age of 16 with diminished capacity than good. That they're going to produce, more good than harm. On our side, we say, take them out of the system altogether. They are not the persons who should be treated as though they're predators. The principle in this debate is about when criminal law should be used. We say where there's a clear predator-prey relationship. They seem to be accepting that. If that's true, why are they including consensual sex among persons who are below the age of 16 who have a 2-year gap? That principle they haven't contended with.
Another exciting match in the semi-final round. It feels like a final, right? Let's give the teams a final round of applause. That was the last fight for a spot in the grand finale, which takes place on July 9 in the public sector debate competition. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the Accountant General's Department debated the mood, be it resolved that Jamaica should decriminalise consensual sex between minors who are close in age. Thank you, teams. The judges will now deliberate, and we will use that time to refresh ourselves. And the next person from which you will hear is our chair adjudicator, who will sum up the match and announce the winner and finalists who will be joining Team Administrator General's Department in the grand finale. For those of you online, stay tuned. That's very funny. Was that a foot in the mouth or a hand in hand? Anyways, we love it, and we encourage you online to stay tuned. We'll be back in a few minutes or so. Well done, teams.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the judges are back after a long period of deliberation, and I want to say three things before we head into it. First, the views expressed by the teams are not necessarily their own views. An accusation was made that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade stands by a position. I want it clear that the debate team stands by the position that was assigned to them. The second thing I want to say is that, as you saw, we took a very long time to have this deliberation. This was a spectacular match. Yes, give them a round of applause. And the last thing I'll say is that if I could take this match, put it in a box, and present it to any stakeholder and say, this is competitive debating, I would be a very wealthy man. So again, give them another round of applause. This is a grand finals worthy debate. So be it resolved that Jamaica should decriminalise consensual sex between minors who are close in age. What did we understand? When we understand, coming first of Jamil Tune, first speaker, this really interesting idea that we have over-criminalized our young our minors, and that this is bad, and that there are better avenues to support these individuals. Now, we understand as well that, when we over-criminalize, that leads to bad outcomes. We understand that a little bit further down in the debate. We hear coming out from second speaker this really interesting idea that, quite frankly, our minors are undergoing a kind of neurodevelopment that makes them susceptible to their hormones. You get a really interesting biology lesson about the intricacies of puberty and how that functionally translates into the minors not being able to act in a way that is completely their own. They're driven by hormonal urges, and these hormonal urges, she contends, causes them to act in a way that is completely normal, and sometimes that results in sex. And she contends that it is bad to criminalize that normal behavior. We understand that principle coming out from proposition. We hear, however, coming out from opposition that, one, this is not normal. The relationship and the feelings are normal, but the actual accepting of the sex is not normal. The team opposition denies this idea that this is something that we should accept. We're not going to accept these Western liberal democracies. We exist in a world that is governed by a people, and the laws of the land should reflect the views of the people. We understand coming out from team opposition. The debate then goes further on into explaining these guardrails and how these guardrails are important. We hear from team opposition that when we have these guardrails in place and we remove them, we are essentially virtue signaling to the Jamaican society that we are okay with this. Even if that is not the intention of the government, the minors are going to see this and start to engage in sexual activity to a much greater extent. They contend that this is particularly bad, given the fact that these individuals are likely to engage in unprotected sex, we imagine, and unsafe sex, we imagine, being driven by the same kind of hormonal indulgence that we understood coming out from Shekinah, and that is going to be bad. And when the government, as an actor, moral authority, removes these guardrails they contend, that is necessarily going to lead to the outcome being particularly worse. Now, we get into this debate where we had to start off kind of weigh the different ideas. So, team proposition contends that, fine, let us assume for whatever reason that there are some harms that are going to be coming from the removing of the guardrails. They contend that when we weigh those harms against those goods against the harms that they produce, for example, these individuals getting some sort of criminal record and how that negatively affects them, it's not worth it. Opposition responds to that argument via the child divergence program. They contend that even if it is that we keep the law in place, these individuals don't necessarily have to get a criminal record. We can take them and we can train them, we can rehabilitate them, and we can push them through into a greater outcome without giving them the criminal record. This is particularly important, they contend, because it is really difficult for minors to give consent. They contend the same neurological development that we hear over from upside is the same kind of appreciation that makes it difficult difficult for minors to give consent, especially in a super over-sexualized society. And therefore, we can't actually get meaningful and true consent from minors. And the best way to ensure that these individuals who don't have the capacity to consent don't have sex is to not remove any guardrails that will then virtue signal to them that this is something that is okay. We think that was an interesting and beautiful clash of ideas. Other interesting ideas came out in the debate, the question of whether or not, minors can exercise any sort of authority over each other, and in those situations, there being non-consent. The panel thinks, by and large, that, those are the kind of things that the Court of Justice treats with, determining if something is consensual or not, but we do credit to a great extent the inability of a minor as up contents to give consent to begin with. And so we credit that to a great extent. Interesting ideas as well coming out from both reply speakers, really solidifying the debate and bringing it home for both of their teams. And so, the scores ending this match. One team ends on 287 points. Staggering score. That team will be playing for a third place finish. The team that wins this match ends on 292 points. Yes, I believe if my data is correct, this is the highest. This is a record. This is the highest score in the entire competition. Ladies and gentlemen, the record breakers, please cheer for the other AGD in the final, the Accountant General's Department. Congratulations to the Accountant General's Department. Ladies and gentlemen, tremendous debate from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. To provide the award, the best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, and that was their second speaker. Congratulations, Brittany Wright. To provide a token of appreciation commiserating her victory as best debater in the semi-finals match, we invite Executive Director from the Transformation Implementation Unit, Ms. Maria Thompson-Walters.
They will play the Administrator General's Department, so that's going to be a lovely confusion at the finals. And congratulations also to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. They have the teaching service to battle for third place. You've done tremendously well, teams, and we look forward to having you in your glory, all guns blazing, nothing to leave on the floor when we meet again on July 9 for the grand finale. And to our audience, you've been great. It's been a wonderful semi-final day, and we're so happy that we can now take a break and get ready for the finals. Yes. All right.